Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. I know it's busy. As you know, Governor Kasich has proposed a broad range of policy changes through his mid-biennium budget review. You may also know that the state coffers are growing. Right now, Ohio has a budget surplus of $265 million and an additional $250 million in the Budget Stabilization Fund, or the Rainy Day Fund. The state of Ohio also has the potential for up to another $1 billion in additional new revenue under Governor Kasich's proposal to modestly increase the severance tax on the oil and gas industry. Yet despite this growing revenue and all these new policy changes in the MBR, nothing is being done to curb the growing financial crisis for schools and local communities. That was brought on by last year's historically deep state budget cuts. Continuing to starve schools and local communities hurts middle-class families and undercuts our economic recovery. Failing to restore even some of the previous budget cuts will hurt our kids' education, diminish safety services in our local communities, and create more pressures on local property taxpayers. Today, we are proposing the Kids and Communities First Fund. That is designed to help keep teachers in the classrooms and police and firefighters on the streets in communities all across Ohio. This fund will also help curb the growing need for local tax levies due to state budget cuts and provide relief for property taxpayers. I will now turn it over to my colleagues to talk more about why we believe this should be an important priority for Ohio, and they'll explain how the fund will work.
While partisan policies have been prioritized over our children, Ohio's school districts are projecting huge deficits. Schools across the state are left to grapple with the best way to prepare children for the future while having larger class sizes, fewer music and art programs, fewer AP courses, pay-to-play extracurricular activities, and limited or no busing. Last year, the state made historically deep cuts to education. To understand the impact, our policy staff calculated the projected school funding deficit for all of the school districts in Ohio based on their 5-year financial projections, which they're required to submit to the Ohio Department of Education. The results are sobering. In fiscal year 2014, the combined school funding deficit in Ohio is estimated to be $1.79 billion. Here are a few specific examples to provide some context. In Berea, the city schools face a projected deficit of more than $9.5 million for fiscal year 2013 and $4.3 million for fiscal year 2014. The Cincinnati city schools face a projected deficit of more than $53 million in fiscal year 2013 and a frightening $115 million deficit in fiscal year 2014. Westerville City Schools face a projected deficit of more than $20.5 million for fiscal year 2013 and a daunting $26.5 million for fiscal year 2014. In Tuscarawas County, the Joint Vocational School faces a projected deficit of more than $5.38 million for fiscal year 2014, and Dover City Schools face a projected deficit of $1.18 million for fiscal year 2013 and more than $4.3 million for fiscal year 2014. Of particular interest, given recent efforts to address the Cleveland City Schools' financial deficit, they are projecting a $65 million budget deficit unless they can pass a levy this fall. And I would note that last year the state budget cut $59 million from Cleveland schools. It's clear that school districts in every corner of the state are hurting. Inner city, rural, and suburban school districts are screaming for help, and we cannot turn our backs on the kids and communities of Ohio. As further evidence of the crisis, a report by Policy Matters Ohio estimates that the number of school districts in fiscal caution could increase this year by nearly 600%, from 21 districts to 120. And the number of school districts in fiscal watch or fiscal emergency could spike by 300%, from 14 to 43. This sobering picture should cause lawmakers of both parties to start making our kids and communities the top priority. This is important in terms of our children currently, but also the future of the state in terms of our ability to conduct economic development and to attract businesses, because we know that a qualified workforce is incredibly important as businesses are making location and expansion decisions. It has been 15 years since the Ohio Supreme Court ruled that our school funding system is unconstitutional because of its over-reliance on local property taxes. Today, instead of finding ways to reduce this over-reliance, the state of Ohio is reversing course and placing responsibility for the education of our children squarely on the shoulders of local property taxpayers. As a state, we can do better, and we should do better for our kids' sake today and for the future prosperity of Ohio.
Thank you. I'm State Representative Alicia Reese, representing the 33rd House District. And we might add that standing with us today are representatives from the Fraternal Order of Police and the Firefighters Union, and we appreciate them standing with us today. Local communities across the state are struggling like my district. It's raining across the state, and the Rainy Day Fund is growing. However, we have passed the largest budget in Ohio's history, and now the NBR is proposing more new spending. But while it's proposing more new spending, there's something that's critically left behind: funding for classrooms and local communities across the state. Communities big and small across the state are facing layoffs, police and firemen, putting public safety at great risk, or outsourcing critical services to private companies such as Sycamore Township near Cincinnati, which is proposing to do outsourcing with its EMS services. And in some cases, small communities are considering dissolving altogether. Stories of communities cutting or privatizing critical safety services, and in some cases even considering, as I said, dissolving some of their services altogether, are pouring in from across the state. We are at a state of emergency. If we don't protect our communities, we undercut our economic recovery, and we hurt working and middle-class families. Now, I sit on the Finance Committee, and I've said this numerous times as we have seen the budgets come forward and the MBR come forward. What we are seeing is what I describe as trickle-down taxation. We say we're not increasing taxes at the state level, but we cut funding at the local level to local communities and to school districts, forcing them to raise taxes at the local level. We're calling on Governor Kasich and certainly the entire legislative body to end trickle-down taxation and join with us as we ask for a return on investments for kids and communities with our Kids and Community First Fund.
Thank you, Alicia. Of course, we're all pleased to be here today, but I think it's really a sad statement that when we talk about leadership, the leadership is not putting kids and communities first. We shouldn't have to have this kind of press conference today. The Kasich government cuts have been devastating for our local communities. I asked in Finance Committee, for those of you who were at Finance Committee, Director Keene, if they'd even thought about the idea of restoring those cuts. And it was obvious from their responses that it clearly was something that was not on their radar screen. They hadn't even considered it, and not even an afterthought. But the Kasich local government cuts are certainly being felt. We saw a report from the LA Times recently with Uniopolis, Ohio, and Auglaize County. The mayor there proposed the village unincorporate after cuts that included laying off the town's police and turning off streetlights. We're to that point in this state. We're actually turning off streetlights now. The mayor said, we've decided that with the budget cuts, we just can't do it anymore. About the only thing that can save it now is an act of God. And that was a quote by the mayor. In Richland County, not far from here, the commissioners are proposing a temporary emergency 1/4% sales tax in an attempt just to stay afloat with all these local government cuts. The county faces a more than $1.8 million shortfall. One commissioner said further reductions to the GRF would, quote, make it difficult, if not impossible, for some elected offices to carry out their state constitutional and statutory responsibilities. And as was reported in the Lima News, Allen County officials are urging Governor Kasich, Representative Huffman, and Senator Faber to, quote, to consider fairness and balance in the state revenue policies that would recognize the vital role our public school districts and local governments play. You know, when somebody picks up the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning because somebody's breaking in their bedroom, you know, they don't ask if that's you're going to send over a Democrat or a Republican police officer. They just want to make sure they're going to be there. And unfortunately, now I think a lot of residents are very concerned that when they make that call, that it's going to be a long time before help is on the way. We need to start giving priorities again to local government, to our local schools. As I said, we shouldn't have to have this press conference today. It should be common sense. It should be a rational idea to say we should be putting our kids and communities first. Stories like this with local governments are playing out all across Ohio. I think we're putting forward a very rational and reasonable plan, and we hope that the Republican majority and this governor will adopt it.